Hello. This is an overview of what we discussed in class for our introduction to government. I'm not going to read everything that is typed here, but please feel free to pause the video as we go and to read some of the more finer detail that is provided here. So we talked about examples of types of government. We talked about a few of them. We started off with monarchy, and that's a hereditary king or queen as the chief executive. Hereditary meaning being born into the right family. Often it is the firstborn son who's going to become the chief executive. England under George III was a monarchy. We also talked about a totalitarian dictatorship or totalitarianism, where one person or small group hold absolute control, or as absolute as one can get. They're not born into it, but take power over time. This type of government can start off as a republic or a democracy, which we're going to talk about in just a moment, but over time can become totalitarian. An example would be Hitler, as well as Stalin. We talked about a republic. This is where supreme power, political power, resides in a body of citizens who vote for their government. And the government is supposed to behave according to established rules and laws, and elected representatives have to stand for re-election from time to time. Very similar, we talked about a democracy, where supreme power resides in the people who vote for their government. The translation of the term democracy is from Greek, demos meaning the many, krasi meaning rule by, so rule by the many. Then we talked about the difference between a republic and a democracy. Very closely related, and in some cases they are exactly the same, but not necessarily. So be able to explain this claim. It could be argued that in 1789, when George Washington and the first Congress were elected under the rules of the new Constitution, as written in Philadelphia in 1787, that the United States was a republic. Washington and the first Congress were elected. They were voted into office by people, but not a democracy. It could be argued that the United States did not become a democracy until 1920 or even 1965. Be sure you understand what I mean by that. We did talk about it in class. And today, the United States is generally considered a democracy and a republic. It is both, but it began as only a republic. Keep in mind, if one thinks democracy is a better form of government compared to a monarchy, which is what we were under King George III, then becoming a republic is moving in the right direction for sure. Then we talked about what is government for? What does it do? You did a journal entry, you broke up into groups, and then we brainstormed ideas, and this is what you came up with, that governments help to organize society. For safety, for progress, to get things done in an organized way. And then we talked about examples of how your life, since you woke up this morning, was affected by either local, state, and or the federal government. And these were the examples that you came up with. There are no or few potholes in the roads. So you're able to, and the roads were built in the first place because of government. So I was able to drive from Falls Church, Virginia to McLean in about 20 minutes without popping all four of my tires. And government's tax to pay for these things to be able to get done, electricity to traffic lights and things like that. And then we talked about some classes didn't get to this. We will in our next class. So, but I'll put it here in this video anyway. The three parts of government. Governments are usually divided into three parts. One part is the executive branch. The executive branch. The executive branch enforces the law or the rules. The executive branch has a lot of employees that work for it. At the federal government level, the federal government, the executive branch, President Joe Biden has over 1 million people technically that work for him. In the United States, the term that we use to call the executive of the whole country is the president. The term that we use for the executive at the state level is governor, also an executive. They're the ones who enforce the law, enforce the rules, the governors for the states. Some countries, instead of using the word president, will use the term prime minister. Same idea. They are the executive. England, the United Kingdom uses the term prime minister. Spain, Canada, and others called their chief executive prime minister. In the United States, we call our chief executive the president. A king or queen is also a chief executive. It is the executive. George III was the chief executive of England. They're the ones that the military worked for them, and they had to listen to Parliament, so there was a balance. But it's the king who was the chief executive, who got things done day to day. The second branch of government is the legislative branch. They're the ones who make the rules that the executive branch is supposed to follow. And there's several different names. They're all considered legislative branches. So when we talk about Congress in Washington, D.C., which is made up of the House and the Senate, that is the legislative branch for the United States of America, for the U.S. federal government. In Richmond, Virginia, the legislative branch for the Virginia government is called the General Assembly. That's the legislative branch for the state of Virginia. We call it the General Assembly. So instead of calling it Congress, we call it the General Assembly. And then you have the judicial branch. This is the court system. This is the court system, which deals with rule breakers and disagreements between citizens. And we'll talk more specifically about the Supreme Court at a later time. But right now, that whole branch is and there's many layers to the judicial branch, is the court system. So hopefully this is a helpful review. Please, if you have any questions, write them down, send me an email, ask me in class, drop down during our community time. Thanks.